In this video, we're going to have a look at adding the basic jump mechanic. So we're just going to get the character to jump when we press a key. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to actually do three things. We're going to first of all tell Unity about using the physics that's applied to our character object. We're going to load in the rigid body so that the script can actually access that. And then we're going to apply a force to the rigid body in an upward direction when the player presses a particular key. So in terms of getting this sorted out, first of all, I'm going to set up a value for my upward force that I'm going to apply to the character. I'm going to say this is going to be a public float. Again, float because I can adjust that more precisely than a whole number. And I'm going to call this one up force. Just use nice, sensible names so that it's easy for us to track what's going on. Okay, I'm going to give it an upward force of, to begin with, 400 F, F for float. And then that means that I've now set up a variable for the up force so that when someone presses the button that we determine later on in the script, that there is an upward force that can actually be applied. Okay, so there's a value for that force to go in. Next, I'm going to do a declaration of the rigid body. The rigid body is what's applying the physics to the character. So I'm going to choose a private value for this one. It's just going to be accessible to this script on its own. And I'm going to say a rigid body 2D, and I'm just going to give that a name. Okay, the name of that is going to be, let's say, RB2D. Okay, nice and simple. I don't need to say equals anything. I just need to say I'm declaring it. This is a rigid body. It's called RB2D. Okay, next up, I need to actually tell my game to go and load in that rigid body when the first frame kicks in. Okay, so that the forces that we're going to apply to that rigid body can be applied to the rigid body properly. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to call on that rigid body RB2D. And I'm going to tell it to get this component, as in use the script to get the rigid body so that it can be used within the script. So that's a get component. And we're going to pop that in as a rigid body 2D. Notice that we do have some code completion options showing up. I need to close this with a pair of regular brackets and finally with a semicolon. So I've now told my script to go and get this rigid body so that the rest of the code has that rigid body ready to apply some forces to. Okay, so next up, I can actually go into my update method. In my update method, remember, that's checking all the time for anything new that's happening. I'm just going to give myself a little bit of space in there, in between my curly braces. Okay, everything for the update method goes in between my curly braces. I've got one here, one here. So I've made myself some space, and I'm going to use an if statement now to say if the input of get key down, that means when the key is pressed down or held down, and I'm going to say that the key code is the up arrow. Okay, so I've said whenever the key up arrow is pressed down or held down, then I'm going to get it to do something. Okay, so my if can then be completed by popping another set of curly braces, and then inside those curly braces I can put my command. So I first of all want it to go and get that rigid body, so I can say RB2D add a force. So I want it to add this force, and the force is going to be in a vector2 format. So it's a new vector2. And for that, I need to specify two values, an X value and a Y value. X is horizontal, so that's going to be 0. And my Y value, my upward or downward motion is going to be my up force. So I'm going to add my up force to that. Okay. So just to recap, I've added a value for my up force, an actual amount of force to apply. I have declared the rigid body. I have got my script to get the rigid body. And then finally, I've put in an if inside my update method to check for the key of up arrow being pressed. And if it is pressed, then it adds the upward force to send my character up in the sky. So I'm happy with that. I'll save that. I'll go back into my Unity project. I'll wait for it to update. Okay, we can check that the console's got no errors, if there are any errors to be showing up in there. And I'll hit my play button. Left and right movement, as I should have from before. And now when I press the up arrow, I can go up. Move while I'm in the sky as well, so I can jump in a direction, which is helpful for moving between platforms. But there is one issue with this. If I repeatedly press my up arrow, the up force will keep being applied. That's a disadvantage because my player could, in the game, use that to their advantage so that they could fly through the level all the way to the end. Okay, so in the next video, we'll look at how to limit that to just a single press of the button being registered. Okay, so you can only jump when you're on the ground